If needlework is your passion, whether you're stitching by hand, machine, or mixing it all up, you're going to want to hear about the Mr. X Stitch Contemporary Needlework Prize 2025. This prize celebrates the best in modern stitch, and it's open to creatives from all around the world, whether you're a student or an emerging artist or a seasoned professional. And the best part, you don't have to send your work anywhere. Just upload high-resolution images to a private folder we will send you after you enter. You can enter more than one category, for instance, hand embroidery and 3D textiles. Just grab an entry for each one. And if you've got a student ID, you can get 50% off the entry price as well. The deadline for entering is 30th of June 2025, and entries are now open at xstitchmag.com/prize-entry. Thanks to our brilliant sponsors, Bookmarked Hub by Search Press and David and Charles, and the legends at Lowry Workstands. If you've got the stitch bug, this is your time. Show us what you've got. Enter the prize now. Visit xstitchmag.com/prize-entry to get your ticket today. Diane Meyer is an American needlework artist whose cross-stitched photography obfuscates the present and offers portals into the past. I've been a fan of Diane's work for years. I've had the opportunity to exhibit her work, and I was super excited to have a conversation with her. When you see Diane's work on face value, you can kind of understand what she's doing, stitching on top of photographs. But if you understand cross-stitch, and indeed I say this to her, you understand there's a real complexity to her work, there's a real skill to the delivery of the work, and the way that she manages to match the cross stitches with the pieces that she's stitching. Diane uses photographs that she's taken from places like Berlin, and has also used photographs from the past, and uses her stitching to remove parts of the present day so that you can see what had gone before. It's a really interesting concept, and in this first part of our needle exchange we talk about her work, how she goes about it, some of the methodology that she's created, the way she's able to take photographs of places and somehow project forward to understand how the stitched pieces might end up. We also learn a lot about photography. Turns out I don't have an idea about this stuff, so it's great to be taught by someone who happens to be a professor on the subject as well. Diane's a fantastic talent. Obviously all her links will be in the show notes to her work, and if you're able to go and check it out, you definitely should. We'll be back next week with the second part of our conversation, where we find out more about her love affair with Berlin, and she's got a great special talent that we'll talk about. But enough about that. Thanks for being here. I hope you're enjoying the show. Feel free to leave a comment on our Instagram and let us know what you think of this episode, and I'll be back next week. So for now, enjoy the show. I always say to people about your work that it needs looking at, and it needs looking at hard, and it needs understanding, because you can look at your work and you can take it at face value. But if you know anything about cross stitch, then you can appreciate how blooming technically difficult what you do is. And I would love for you to just unpack your whole thing for me.
Sure. So I wanted to make the cross stitch part look like pixelization, because at least the concepts I was working with in the beginning had to do with memory and forgetting and thinking about how photographs hold so much of our memories. And so I wanted to kind of equate forgetting with file corruption. And so I wanted to kind of pixelate parts of the image and particularly the places where your eye might be drawn to first in a photograph, like people's faces, or it's to sort of force you to look at the other details. And so I, with the family photos, they're scanned. I print them on an Epson kind of watercolor paper.
Okay.
And I have like a graph paper that I use to like line up the squares, and I punch the square, and then you match the colors. I feel like, I mean, this at this point I have a lot of different thread colors,
Mm-hmm.
and it's definitely gotten faster because I used to hold them all up and see if it matched, but now they're all titled numerically, and so I can see a color and like know exactly what number it
Okay.
is. And
We could do a test on a game show. We could just go, what number is this? And you'll be like DMC 310.
yeah, exactly, which is black. So
Yeah, there you go. Because the thing is this is the thing I say to people. Then obviously I've kind of opened that up quite largely, but the fact of the matter is that you present photographs and then you pixelate over the top of those, and then you stitch them and then you color match them, and yet it has that trick of then when you step back far enough, your mind plays the tricks on you and it puts the whole image together. I did something similar with the Mona Lisa once and was very satisfied when that kind of works. But it is that thing of like the layers of complexity. Now you break it down, you've made it seem within human grasp, but at the same time it's just really clever. Like, it's executed so well, and I was so chuffed when I got to see your work for real. Let's say it was 2017 when I did the exhibition with the National Trust and you sent some pieces over, just because I could have a good old look at them, because it's so clever. And I've seen people stitching on paper and I've seen people, pixelating images, but the fact that you put the two things together so deftly, it's just super impressive. I absolutely love it.
thank you so much.
You started off, like you said, with a lot of like kind of retro family photos. Was that the first sort of venture into this then?
Sort of. I mean, I did cross stitch when I was younger with my mom. I remember she would let me stay up late on Fridays and watch Dallas with her, and we would sew.
Oh, wow.
Which was actually, in retrospect, not the most age appropriate show, maybe for a 3-year-old. So I kind of did it as a hobby, but I always saw it as pretty distinct from my artwork.
Mhm.
And then I started making these like very strange little cross stitch tableaus. I think where I kind of subconsciously started doing it is I had done a project that was very digitally based. So I had shot it on film, but I scanned all the negatives and I was just making digital prints from Photoshop. And I felt really disconnected to the work because I didn't have that kind of tactile kind of haptic interaction with it. And it was a project, when I moved to Los Angeles, I got rid of my car and I got a grant to photograph and interview 100 people living here without a car, since LA is such a car culture.
Okay.
So I feel like after I finished that project, I really wanted to do something tactile and something with my hands. And so I think where I kind of arrived at working with the family photos and thinking about pixelization and file corruption is I had a studio in Santa Monica, and a friend of mine had a boyfriend who was an interior designer, and he got me like hundreds of carpet samples, like the little rectangular carpet samples that kindergartners sit on. And so I was cutting those up into like these tiny 1/2-inch cubes and making these landscapes. I was kind of doing landscapes because most carpet is kind of like neutral
Mm-hmm.
colors. And I was really interested in sort of like the combination of the textiles and the pixelization and the interplay of the light on the fibers, especially because the carpet had different levels of piling. So there's also kind of like a depth change that would happen. Then I started to wonder like how bad carpet is for you, because when I would cut it with an X-Acto knife into these little squares, there'd be all this like crumbled, like rubbery carpet dust everywhere. And it turns out, after I Googled it, it was pretty bad.
Okay.
And I left I was leaving my studio, and I didn't want to bring all of it into my apartment because it was just really toxic. And But I think subconsciously that's what kind of planted the seeds of this idea of pixelization and textiles, even though I didn't actually realize that for a while, but retrospectively looking back, I think that's where the idea came from. So the first series was with the family photographs, and I guess I would say like my childhood was like pretty dysfunctional, but it would always kind of be surprising to then look at my family photo album, which, like all family photo albums, is this very not unlike an Instagram or Facebook feed now, is this kind of like highly curated, idealized version of one's life. And so I felt like looking at the photos, it was interesting because you wouldn't, the reality of it was so different from what the photographs were like. And then I was thinking about how, photos kind of replace memory, and thinking about how photographs then stand in for memory, and become the remembered reality. And so that's why I wanted to, and then I was thinking about, again, like file corruption with forgetting, and like losing information. So that's why I started working with the family photographs. And then I did a residency in Berlin, and my intention was to just continue working on the family photographs when I was there. But I love exploring cities. It's probably my favorite thing to do. And so I just like had such a hard time staying in the studio. I just wanted to walk around and discover the city. And even though it was January and February, which is not a good time, it turns out to be
Bleak.
yeah, really cold, and dark, and dark very early. And so, but anyway, I became really struck by the wall and seeing these neighborhoods and streets that were so lively, and thinking about how in the not that distant past that it had been divided, and what that space would have looked like, and thinking about it as kind of, especially for people who had lived there for a long time, that kind of residual memory of it. Um, and so I realized that some of the ideas that I was thinking about with the family photographs and personal memory kind of lent itself to the collective memory of the wall. So then I started doing the series on Berlin, where I followed the entire circumference of the wall, and then started putting it back into place, but with the pixelated embroidery. So the embroidery kind of stands off the surface of the print and blocks you from entering the photo, but it also is, because it's showing you a pixelated view of what's behind it, also is like translucent. So sort of translucent and opaque at the same time, and like a ghost almost in the landscape, which is what the wall felt like to me.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That is fascinating. And I think there is something I really like about like you say, this kind of false version of events, or the way everyone presents these pristine images. And over time, you'll look at them, and those will be the things that you sort of remember, because you block out all the other bad stuff, don't you, intrinsically? Like your mum having a meltdown over the Brussels sprouts or whatever it would be, And how long did that idea take to come to reality? Like, did you just tinker around with like a photo one time and kind of feel it out a little bit? Or did it come as like quite a fully formed concept once that penny had dropped?
No, I mean, I knew that I wanted to work with thinking about photography and memory, and personal photographs in regards to that. So I feel like it was sort of the technique and the concept kind of came together at the same time.
Do you think your childhood relationship to cross stitch made it like quite a natural thing? You were like, oh, well, I'm looking at photos of my childhood, I'm feeling these cross stitch vibes. Did it kind of come through a bit like that?
That's an interesting, I never actually thought about it that way, but that's really interesting. Maybe on a subconscious level, but not intentionally.
Because photography was what you studied, right? Is that right?
Yeah. So I went to college for photography at NYU, and then I went to the University of California, San Diego, for my MFA, and that was just a kind of general visual arts program. And so we were encouraged to cross into different mediums. And so I did some sculpture and things like that there. So I think that is partially what also kind of made me want to go back and work with my hands again.
Yeah. And was there, I mean, so what was the path from like doing a bit of cross, like were you always a creative kid? Were you always doing bits and pieces and then somehow you ended up in photography, or like how did that become the choice?
Yeah, it was well, I was a very indecisive undergraduate, so I was probably every advisor's nightmare because I had transferred schools 3 times. I think I had 10 different majors
Okay.
because I would take a class and get interested and then I don't know, keep changing my mind. But I basically I had done a lot of photography in high school and I really liked it, but I guess I never thought that I guess maybe I felt like a pressure that I had to do something like quote unquote practical or something. And so even though I really liked it, it never occurred to me to study it as a major and pursue it more seriously. And then we had, you had to take a creative class as kind of just a general education requirement. And so I took photography, and I had a professor that and I loved the class, and I had a professor that just like really, really encouraged me to keep going. And then ultimately I switched majors again and became a major.
Because it's, I don't know, I sometimes think photography is another one of those art forms that people struggle to take seriously. I might be wrong about this, and I know that, you know, it's completely valid. There are plenty of people that collect it. I know Elton John loves collecting photography. Um, but it feels like one of those things where, again, it's still kind of, I don't know, it's not even a new technology now. I just feel like sometimes it gets struggled. Like to go and see a photography exhibition, unless it's some really kind of cool thing, you wouldn't necessarily expect to see them in the portrait galleries, I guess. It feels like there's maybe a similarity with textile art in the way that people slightly discount it, maybe because everybody can do it. Would that seem reasonable?
Yeah, I feel like that was more true of photography a while ago. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I
could
feel
be.
I don't feel like that so much now, but it's also just could be because I see a lot of photography shows. So but yeah, and I think I think that in terms of thinking about textiles and embroidery, I think that kind of division between quote unquote art and craft, I think is really kind of has broken down a lot um, in the past 10 years or so, and it's, I don't see them as being so separate.
Yeah,
And I wonder if part of that is kind of a reaction to things like Instagram, where you're just seeing all of these images online, that there's something about maybe the slowness or the tactility of textiles
yeah.
that people are interested in.
I mean, I sort of wonder the same thing with photography, though. And again, I'm coming from a point of ignorance in as much as I don't do a lot of it. Interestingly, my youngest, Annie, aged 5, is really interested in taking photographs. And so we've got a couple
Oh,
of like digital cameras kicking around that we're kind of letting her play with as long as she doesn't drop them, because it seems to be a naturally occurring thing. And I wonder kind of the same, because suddenly with mobile phones, everybody can take loads of photographs, that it's become a bit more broadly accepted or something, and so therefore naturally, if you play the numbers, perhaps more people are inclined to see it as an art form. But I just still, to me, it feels like it was another one of those ones that struggled to get taken seriously for quite a long time, because it was quite a practical thing. You just take photography as a means to an end, perhaps making products and stuff. And so there are some quite strong similarities between the journey that's been on to become a valid art form and the one that embroidery seems to come close and then get further away and come close and get further away. It seems like you've hit some Venn diagram that's bang in the middle of those two things as well.
yeah, no, I think it's interesting how people's perceptions of mediums change. I know just as a professor now, when I first started teaching, I feel like the students would always be really disappointed when they found out that a photo one was a darkroom class, and really frustrated, and they would feel like I could do this in Photoshop in 5 seconds. Why am I doing this? And now it's the opposite, where the students really want to be in the darkroom classes, and so I think it's kind of a reaction against digital imaging and everyone having a camera phone in their pocket.
Is it a bit like the sort of vinyl revival, where really there is now a bit of a revival of these more traditional photography methods because
Yeah,
people are placing
I
value
think
on it?
so. I think it's not, but I think I don't. I think it's a little different. I feel like the vinyl revival is more about nostalgia, but
Mm.
with these students, they never. It's not really nostalgia because they never had experienced film photography, and they grew up with parents who had digital cameras at this point. So I, so I think it's more. I mean, there might be some nostalgia in it, but I think it's more like the process and wanting to see photography as a process and have that kind of experience of creating it. That, I mean, it's kind of magical when you put the photo paper in the developer and see the image suddenly appear.
Yeah, and that's the thing, I think, because I mean, like I've got records, and I think you get a different sound out of them. So I recognise the nostalgia, but there is something like the format drives the experience. You know, with vinyl, it's slightly
Yeah,
richer, and I feel like that would be the same, wouldn't it? Even if you photo print a digital photograph, there's still a certain flatness. I feel like if you're going to go and get chemistry on it, then you're going to get this different, like you say, like a haptic experience of producing photographs or something.
yeah, yeah. And I think there's like room for chance that doesn't happen with Photoshop, where you can control every pixel. And
And is photography the thing that you're professor of? Forgive me.
yeah.
Yeah. So okay then. Can you school me? Can you, if you go, right, Jamie, you've just talked absolute garbage for 10 minutes about photography. Let me tell you what photography is. How do you, is there an introduction to it? Is there a way that you now explain photography to people who just think it's stuff you do on your phones?
That, I mean, I guess we start off talking about things like camera obscuras and things like that, and some of the optics, and I think people see like how simple it actually is and how basic a camera needs to be. But no, I think it's just kind of like a lot of looking at images and talking about them in the beginning.
I swear. Do you think I'm overthinking this? Do you think sometimes I think too much about this stuff?
No.
I always like anytime there's a mystery. Anytime I was talking to a plumber the other day who was like trying to fit something in my bathroom, and I was going in depth. Or like the other day, I went to the vets and we were talking about like euthanasia, and I was like, all I'm doing is getting my dog weighed. I'm like, Chalmers, you need to dial it back a little bit or something like that. So, but then the photography element of this is critical to your embroidery practice, correct?
Yeah, I haven't really done very much without having photography included. I think I was making these kind of like weird little tableaus, but at one point, like really simple ones. But yeah, like it really recently has just been with photography.
And when you started out, it was like photographs that already existed, but then you said when you went to Berlin, you started taking photographs like in the here and now and conducting your own time travel, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the images were so in the series based on family photographs, I kind of see it as like this ongoing visual diary. So some of the images were images that my mother took when I was little. Some of them are images that I took in high school of my town. Some of them are travel photographs that are more recent, or family photographs from now that I've taken. So it's I see it more as like kind of an ongoing archive.
Mm-hmm.
But then with the Berlin work, and because that series is based on snapshots, so a lot of the images are ones I've just taken with my phone or something. And then with the Berlin project, I shot everything on medium format film and took all the photographs.
And does that mean that you can't be so slapdash about it? Like there's much more of a deliberacy in your photo taking because you don't have that many shots to spare.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because especially with um, with film, you do have to be really, it forces you to slow down, and you can't just take hundreds of you have to really be a little more slow and deliberate. I think it was kind of tricky at first because I realized, even though I knew I wanted to embroider the wall into the photographs, I wasn't like thinking about that exactly when I took the photographs. So I would compose them in a way where, maybe like visually, where I would like maybe frame it so that your eye would move through the photograph, or like use lines. Like I realized that when I embroidered it, all of that got covered up, and so I had to kind of compose photos a little bit differently. So that was kind of when I looked at the first like few contact sheets, realized I had to kind of reshoot and think more about the fact that like half of or parts of the image would be covered up.
Yeah, because I can imagine actually if you took something at the wrong angle, suddenly it's not like you've just got a flat grid, because a lot of your pieces, the flatness of the grid is really useful, isn't it? It's all part and parcel of it. But something where you've got a sense of depth perception is going to be a right bugger to try and recreate in stitching. So does that mean then that now if you're taking photographs, you're kind of looking at a thing and in your mind you're jumping forward to the bits that you're going to obfuscate or transform, and then you're reframing it in the moment, kind of?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I kind of have to think about it as I'm taking the photograph, like what I'm going to cover. And
Oh, I mean, I can tell you've done this a lot, so you're quite practiced at it. But that's quite a head spinner, isn't it? To think, okay, which bits of this view that I'm looking at am I going to transform in my mind and sort of be able to visually see or something? Do you
the
find, do the end results look like the things you imagine at the time?
no, I mean, not exactly. I mean, I guess like when I'm imagining, I'm just kind of imagining like broadly the area that's going to be blocked out, but not really like visualizing the embroidery per se. Although the embroidery kind of just looks like a pixelated view of what is there.
Mm.
But I guess I mean I'm more thinking about it in advance in terms of like where the embroidery will go, kind of.
Are you quite in tune with what kind of catches your interest? Like I went on a walking tour of my town yesterday because I'm part of this little cultural group, and the town where I live has got a lot of opportunity, which is a diplomatic way of saying it's really down on its heels at the moment. But we were kind of looking around and looking at like old shops that have now closed, but shops where like the bottom half's quite modern but the top half's quite old because it was built maybe 100 years ago, so you get all these interesting roof lines and all these bits and bobs. And trying to feel inside my head like what I thought were the things that were noteworthy, because we were on a little mission to kind of like take photographs of things that caught our eye. Like there was this really old loose tobacco shop that was completely run down, but that was really interesting because it was still there in like preserved, and I'm trying to feel out the things that catch my interest.
Did you find that what was the most interesting thing you found out about your town that you didn't know?
Well, certainly one of the things was we've got this chain of shops called WH Smiths that were a newsagent, and they've been around for like 150 years, something like that. And there's one particular roof when you look at it that's got these 3 circular windows at the top of it. And it turns out that they'd built that building and had those windows put in deliberately. And across the country, those were the buildings that they had. Like they built those buildings, so you could tell by looking at the building that it was going to be a WH Smith's because they'd architecturally put these 3 windows at the top that were circular, and that was how you knew. And like to me that was really interesting. And like I say, just seeing some of the roof lines, and then every now and again you would see like, so some of these roof lines were like, or the buildings were originally built in like say turn of the century, like 1900s, 1910s, 1920s. Then every now and again you'd pivot into the 1960s vibe where the windows are a lot more rectangular and maybe things are a bit more like brutally concrete. And then some 1990s thing would come along where they put a red brick facade on the front of it and it just looked really ugly. And what was quite nice was we were walking around with people who'd lived in the town for like 40, 50 years. And so they were able to help with the time travel and go, well, that used to be that. And then that building got pulled down. And we had this like Art Deco cinema in the center of the town that had like a concierge on the front door and all of that. And now it's just a really ugly like retail section. And it's kind of like those things to me. like in my house downstairs, underneath the stairs, there's a piece of wallpaper that's got kind of like, I want to say it's like 1920s drawings of like KitchenAlia on it. And it's like a
Oh,
little window into the past, because it's just there under the stairs and I don't ever want it to go. And I
yeah,
kind of like that, that's why I like that tobacco shop. That's why I like those roofs, because they're fragments of a past that had like a real quality. Like, when people would just, like people would build gargoyles. Nobody builds gargoyles now unless they're trying to like
yeah,
prove a point. Whereas that back in the day, they would do that, put round windows on because it was a nice thing to do. And I like when you see that through like all the homogenization of like your general like retail section.
yeah, yeah. No, definitely. I think that's something that I find frustrating sometimes about Los Angeles is that everything is so new, that you don't have as much of a sense of history, or things that had been historical have been knocked down and turned into a car wash or something.
And is that what you tend to tune into then? Are those some of the things that you're looking for, like those moments where you can maybe bridge the gap?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think a lot of my work, even before I was doing the embroidery, was really inspired by place, and trying to discover kind of the spatial and psychological aspects of place, and using art to kind of understand it more, and find things that um, were interesting to me.
You did some work to do with mascots, right?
Oh yeah, uh-huh.
Is that a
Yeah,
symbol? Because that's a way of expressing a part of a town through a completely different format, isn't it?
yeah, that's an interesting point. And it wasn't, but they weren't based on any real places, or
Mm.
anything like that. But I've always, I mean, speaking of wallpaper, I've always been really interested in patterns and wallpaper, and so I think, I was kind of thinking about that when I photographed them, and would like, wallpaper, just like a kind of wooden flat behind them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's interesting about mascots in terms of place.
Yeah, because it's just it's like a creative outpouring, I suppose, isn't it? You get a team in a place, and then at some point a mascot evolves out of that team, and that becomes a symbol for the place. And then all of a sudden you don't fully understand why. But there's one, isn't there, that's particularly freaky looking. And I'm going to go
The
complete.
Philly fanatic.
There you go. That'd be the one, isn't it? And yeah, it's quite a weird evolution, isn't it? It's almost like that you can, in the same way as you can judge a place by its accent, maybe you can judge a place by its mascots as well.
Yeah.
Um, what was I going to say? I was talking with Liz Konecki a while ago, and she's very much interested in like psychogeography and bits and bobs like that. And she did a series of projects. This is like, again, I think it was a photography project, even before she got to the needlework, where she was looking at like buildings where part of them had been pulled down. So you could see inside like a block of flats, and you could see all the decor inside a block of flats, and you could really see like these little bits, like you say, like wallpapers and tiling treatments and all these like remnants of like little moments of people making their marks. And it was just another like a funny little way of looking through the window at a time gone by or something.
Yeah, no, definitely.
They very much push my buttons. What? So you did Berlin. You've also done Venice.
Yeah, that's a new project that I've been working on. I'm just thinking, kind of. I was thinking about um, the vulnerability of Venice in terms of depopulation, and it becoming kind of a, almost,
A theme park.
yeah, yeah, or like, I was trying to think of a way to put it, but that's a good way to put it. Where, so much of the local population is drastically falling year after
Mm.
year, and also vulnerability to climate change, and so that's something that I'm still kind of working out, and it's at the very early stages so far.
Because with that one, there's something about you. Are you kind of like removing elements rather than stitching over them?
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of play around with thinking about, like, removing, instead of embroidering over the photograph, removing part of it, and then trying to recreate it, but through the kind of patterns in the embroidery. So yeah, it's something I'm still trying to figure out and work out and experiment with.
And what's that process like? How do you know when it feels right?
I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I think it's maybe more intuitive. Like it doesn't feel quite right yet, but I'm not sure exactly what I need to do, or but I feel like when it does feel right, it'll just feel right.
Yeah. Is there what portion of your brain is taken up with the needlework stuff? Because obviously you've got a very busy career, and that's on one artistic stream and supporting young people in their evolution. So, I mean, that must be quite consuming and inspiring. Does this stuff just kind of bubble away in the back of your head and then every now and again rise to the surface?
I think so. I mean, I think sometimes when you're not trying to think of something, this is when you think of something, or pops into your mind. I think doing the embroidery gives you lots of monotonous hours of sitting there doing a repetitive task that allows your brain to kind of disassociate and think of different things and imagine different things. Because there's something I find, even though it takes forever and it is this very long repetitive task, it's there's kind of a meditative quality.
Thanks for joining me on another Needle Exchange. I hope you enjoyed the show. I'd love to hear from you, so feel free to email hello@needle.exchange, that's NEEDL.exchange, with any thoughts, comments or feedback. And if you want to keep up with all the news, sign up to the Needle Exchange mailing list at bit.ly/needleexchange. See you next time.